Chapter 1. Devils in Our Heaven. "What is it, Yasmin?" he asked, approaching his assistant and head of security. "Shemika," he said, nodding to his head of security. "Supreme Commander," Shemika acknowledged at the military stance of attention. "This is Bad Azrael," Yasmin briefed. "Terrorists have stormed the upper levels. They hacked 3 of our security bots, and there are at least 10 heavily armed assailants headed this way. I'm glad I bumped into Sophia. She told me to give you these," she said, handing him a flat aluminum case. "Armor?" Shemika asked disappointedly. "It almost seems like you think I can't do my job," the head of security said, with a frown. "This isn't protocol," she objected. "I just happen to have it, and we just happen to be getting attacked," Yasmin countered. "Sorry, next time I'll fill out the forms." She rolled her eyes. "Form smorms," Azrael mocked. "I prefer armor. I'm done with this suit." "And Ty, get up," he told them. "As long as I'm wearing armor, you should assume I will be armed," he informed. "I'll make myself an indefinite form. How about that?" he asked Shemika with an obnoxious tone. She merely shook her head. "Haven't killed in 3 months. Whose head is getting knocked off today?" he asked Yasmin. "Some Christian terrorists, CPLA or something," she told him. "Let me guess, more religious zealots coming to kill their black Antichrist?" he asked rhetorically. "If I were the Antichrist, wouldn't that be a good thing for the Christians? Because that would make Yodova's return quite imminent." He smirked while he entered the PIN code on the slim touchscreen of the case. "Wouldn't killing me be an attempt to disrupt prophecy? The Christ needs an Antichrist," Azrael reasoned aloud. The case opened with a hydraulic hiss. The contents were pressurized. It contained a suit of armor, a plasma sword, and a plasma carbine with 2 energy cells and 5 grenades. He donned the space-age polymer battlesuit that was in the case and attached his weapons and gear. It almost appeared to be alive, how it slithered and slid to mold to Azrael's muscular frame. The suit was a dull silver comprised of many hexagons. "Is this the latest specs from DARPA?" he asked Shemika, who had on a similar suit. She held an aggressive carbine blaster slung over her chest. "I never seen that suit before," Shemika said, sizing up his armor. "Is this a new model?" she asked. Yasmin chimed in. "Yes, it's been tested in Sophia's lab and at the range. This is the first battle test. Try not to lose your head," she joked. "Not only will the suit render you impervious to bullets and mild fragmentations, but it will also augment your muscular system and make you faster and stronger. If the suit senses you're in danger before you do, it will take evasive maneuvers on your behalf," she explained. "Excellent. This is a real Superman suit." Azrael marveled at the artisanship and functionality. He loaded a carbine like Shemika's and dropped a grenade in the launcher under the rifle barrel. Yasmin took cover behind a marble counter with her pistol trained on the left door. "No, more like Captain America. You can't fly or shoot lasers from your eyes," she countered. Shemika sighed. "This is nice to have now, but these are unauthorized weapons on this floor. They haven't been cleared through my department," she said, aggressively scanning the room for intruders. "If I didn't break policy, we'd be more outgunned than we are now," Yasmin argued. "What good is policy and authority if it's not being respected?" she asked. "You have authority over everyone else," he reminded her. "Not me. Now do as I say, not as I do," he instructed while he flexed the nanomachine muscles of his battle armor. "This whole I'm above the law attitude is only going to lead to tyranny and your forced removal from power," Shemika warned. "All avenues of power lead to the highway of absolute power, and absolute power corrupts absolutely," Azrael countered. "Even if I become a tyrant, I have the most loyal security forces watching my back," he said with a wink. Before Shemika could respond, the doors busted open from the impact of an explosion. "Contact right," Shemika shouted and fired her weapon at the armed robot that smashed through the thick double doors. Her blaster's beams connected with Killer Machine, pelting it with hot orange sparks. Still, the beams didn't penetrate the armor. "Fire in the hole!" Azrael yelled as he shot the shape-charged high-explosive grenade at the menacing machine. The plastic pieces on the armor began to melt, but the killer robot pressed on firing lasers into the auditorium. "Can you take this thing offline?" he shouted to Shemika as he loaded another grenade from behind concealment provided by the seats. "The hackers removed this bot from the registry. It doesn't exist on the database," she said, reloading her rifle with a power cell. "How did they remove it from the blockchain? Isn't it unhackable?" he asked as he popped up to shoot another grenade. The explosive burst with a brilliant flame. It was a direct hit, yet the blast did not stop the robot. It only aided in giving away their position. Even with the molten copper shape charge, the blast did not penetrate the robot's thick armor. "I'm not sure how they pulled that off. That's a question for Boa and Miyoshi," she said, in between blaster burst. The foot soldiers were piling in behind the other two robots. They were surrounded. "Do you see the first global citizen? We can save the world if we take that nigger Antichrist head," one of the terrorists shouted in the doorway to his comrades. "Yeah, get some, you Coon King," another shouted as he needlessly sprayed the room with his machine gun for effect. "Don't shoot at me, you idiots," Shemika mumbled as the bullets from the terrorist flew over her head. "Where are our killer robots?" Yasmin asked. "Hell, where are the rest of our human security forces?" she inquired, landing a headshot on one of the terrorist gunmen. His brains splattered on the black marble walls and he dropped with his weapon. "Connor," Shemika thought but did not say as she watched the shooter fall from Yasmin's marksmanship. She glared at Yasmin before she regained her poise. The hackers also managed to seal the elevators and entrances to this sector. The sensors have been fried and knocked offline. We can't remote access the doors. Shemika replied, "Our team is outside of the blast doors. This is an epic security breach and I take full responsibility," she said, rolling to the row of seats to the right. She managed to land 2 shots on the robot with her maneuver. Still, the mechanical beast pressed on. "I thought the mole said the Coon King would be unarmed," the shooter with the Confederate flag on his shirt said. He crouched to take cover while looking at Connor's dead body. "The nigger bitch was probably a double agent," the terrorist in the MAGA shirt said. "Over there," one of the terrorists shouted. "Send the robots. We'll confirm the kill and take that nigger's naughty dreadhead." The shooter with the fake blue and black American flag concluded, "With robotic obedience, the killing machines advanced on Azrael's position." The multi-barreled miniguns began to whirl and fire, turning the seats to confetti. Azrael and his team were pinned down. Hot brass rained down on the marble floors like hundreds of coins falling to the ground. "Has this armor been battle-tested for 30mm rounds?" he asked facetiously as tracers flew over their heads. The robot's hydraulic legs hissed as it searched for its target. Yasmin almost burst out laughing. "Not quite, only up to 7.62, she pointed out. The killer robots were wielding much larger weapons than the calibers the armor was tested to resist. The roar of the spinning barrels persisted as Azrael and Shemika maneuvered to strike. "I guess we need to test the auto-evasive mode," he said, hurling himself over the seats towards the robot's deadly onslaught. "Azrael!" Yasmin shouted as he headed into the fight. Shemika watched in astonishment. His battle suit jerked him aside out of the line of fire. Sparks filled the dim-lit auditorium as the gunmen and the robots attempted to engage the agile battlesuit. Azrael rushed to roll forward, but the suit attempted to pull him back to where he first took cover. "No, override," We must engage and evade. Azrael commanded the battlesuit as he leapt forward 15 feet, firing his blaster at the gunman. The shots burned a hole in the chest of the man with the Confederate flag shirt. He dropped breathlessly to the ground. The suit seemed to understand, and it aided Azrael as he leapt toward the robot while evading its deadly fuselage of bullets. The auto-evasive mode enabled him to backflip with ease out of enemy fire. The suit's hundreds of sensors behaved like tiny eyes, observing the battlefield 360. It relayed the sensory data to a swarm of nanomachines that enabled the suit to move accordingly. He could run on the walls, as well as perform an extensive array of acrobatic feats. Azrael quickly found himself behind the killer robot. The superhuman strength the suit bestowed allowed him to rip the 8-barrel machine gun from its shoulder and dismantle the laser on the other side. Finally, Azrael punched through the back of the robot's body and removed the power core and CPU. The killer machine was rendered inert and hunkered over in defeat. 2 more to go, he thought as he lunged towards the other robot in the far corner of the room. Yasmin was out of ammo and pinned down behind the marble pillar. She was screaming into her paper-thin phone at the twin tech leads, Boa and Miyoshi. "Get those fucking blast doors open now," she shouted over the firefight, and out of frustration. "The nodes were knocked offline. We can't access it from our position." Boa ensured. She was doing her best to retain a calm disposition. "We've already dispatched a wizard to patch in on scene. His ETA is 8 minutes out," Miyoshi said from a white glass desk across from her sister Boa. "Are you fucking kidding me? I'm watching the Terminator shred up office furniture with a fucking minigun." She screamed with her back against the wall. "In less than 8 minutes, I, the Secretary of Security and the first citizen of the blessed world, will all be smears of blood and brains," she shouted. "We understand your frustration, ma'am, but we're going to need you to stand by," Boa said, with the positive tone of a customer service rep. She put the line on mute to speak freely to her sister. "We fucked up," she said with a look of disappointment. "Don't give up so soon. Look for unconventional options. What nodes are still on the network? What can we still control?" Miyoshi asked while running a system scan. "I already checked. All points of entry have been overridden to the broadcast floor. The terrorists have full control." Boa insisted, typing furiously at her touchscreen keyboard. "Still, we're able to move the cameras," Miyoshi said, demonstrating to her sister. "We have an entire array of options. This one says C4, Miyoshi pointed out. "That's to level the entire floor. Don't mess with that," Boa insisted. "Chillax," Miyoshi said. "We can detonate individual panels." She pointed out the panels indicated on the map of the floor. "Unmute the line, please," she commanded. "Yasmin, I need you to move to the other end of the room. We're going to blow that panel of C4, she instructed. "I'm under thick solid cover right now and you want me to move? C4? What the hell are you talking about?" Yasmin asked, peeking her head up from behind the marble slab to see the ongoing battle. Shemika was out of ammo and drew her plasma blade. It hissed to life with a long, shimmering pink and purple ray of plasma. She popped a small smoke grenade and charged into the clouds, swinging her blade at the killer machine. The gunfire and the plasma sword appeared to be fierce lighting in a room-sized storm. She rolled under the spray of fire and towards the bipedal legs of the machine. "I shall destroy you," Shemika roared as she swung her sword at the legs of the killer robot. The 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit blade cut through steel like a hot knife through plastic. Her strike left her lying on her back. The quarter-ton machine fell back, pinning her to the floor. She grunted in pain. "This thing is heavy," she muttered to herself. The machine struggled as it was knocked off balance and legless. Shamika struggled to position her sword to pierce the critical components of the machine. She rammed the blade through the center of the robot and shut it down. Shamika harnessed the strength of her suit to hurl the inert machine off her. It wasn't the same model as Azrael's, but it was still tough. She turned around to check her six. She nodded to Yasmin, then scanned for Azrael. He wasn't supposed to have that suit, she thought to herself. He was supposed to be unarmed, she considered. But then again, these robots weren't supposed to be engaging me with their weapons, she thought in confusion. And Connor, she whispered, I'm sorry, baby. This is not going as planned. Shamika grunted to herself. Looks like Shamika cleared a path for you. Head to the left side of the room and lay low. Miyoshi instructed Yasmin over the phone. I really want to sit tight here. Yasmin started. Oh shit, she muttered as a much larger robot towering at 13.5 feet tall entered the room. It had rockets, grenades, and quad miniguns. Azrael was keeping it busy by flipping off walls and spraying the armor with his blaster to no effect. The giant killer robot was hurling rockets and grenades and tracing Azrael's movement with machine gun fire. He retreated and took cover with Shamika behind a desk. That's why we need you on the other side. Now make a run for it, Miyoshi insisted as she put the call on mute. Boa, please patch Azrael and Shamika in on the call. We need to get this information to the rest of the team. She spoke. Got it. Boa complied, and the bridge was open. Team, the wizard's still 4 minutes out. I need you to get to the other side of the broadcast room. We're going to blow the left column and take down that BattleBot, Miyoshi said over his headset. Azrael, if you can lure the robot near the pillar, we may be able to take it out with the blast, Boa suggested. Great idea, Boa, Azrael said genuinely over the rat-a-tat-tat sound of machine gun fire. I'm on it, he confirmed. Let me do it, Shamika insisted. Ultimately, I'm responsible for this, she said, puffing out her chest to appear more intimidating. No, I am. I hired you, he said with a smirk. Anyways, I have a better suit. Azrael replied, tapping his futuristic-looking armor. But you're free to tag along, he said, jumping back into the fight without warning. Shamika followed. Yasmin ran to the opposite side of the room. The killer machine locked on Azrael and began an assault with the quad machine guns. The augmentations were beginning to throttle and reach their limitations. It was getting more difficult for him to dodge the fire as the killer robot's AI began to forecast his movements. The robot fired 2 rockets at Azrael. The smoke trails wafted in the room as the heat-seeking explosive ordnance traced his retreat. He ignited his plasma blade. The dark purple and black beam swiped at the first rocket and cleaved it in half. The sparking missile fell to the ground and exploded. The second rocket collided with the fragmentation of the first and blew up near the first global citizen. The flash burned Azrael's right eye and slightly singed that side of his face. He grunted in pain as he recovered to his feet to escape the hot trail of lead closing in on his position. Blow it, Azrael commanded into the mic on his suit. Blow the fucking pillar, he shouted. The robot's not close enough to the pillar. It's out of range, Shamika insisted as she ran back out into the fight to lure the killer machine. She skipped and flipped over the focused machine gun fire and sliced through 2 rockets that burst in her wake. She surfed on another projectile, leveraging it to leap toward the gigantic robot and drove her sword into its core. There were many sparks as polymer and steel sizzled under the force of her plasma strike. Still, her blow only rendered the left cannons inoperable. The machine was still capable of providing a formidable assault. With blue and orange sparks flying from its core, like a menacing sparkler, it spun in a furious circle of death. The killer robot smote Shamika with its large mechanical fist and sent her flying 20 feet towards the pillar. She hit the ground with a thud. Shamika! Azrael and Yasmin seemed to shout in unison. Shamika crawled backwards slowly to the column with the C4. The bots were supposed to be programmed to omit me as a target. She thought as she shook off the stars in her Vison. She was dazed from the blow and the impact. The robot pursued and came into her bloody, blurred field of visions. Double-crossing white supremacist bastards, she grumbled through bloody teeth. Somehow she found clarity. Blow it, she commanded. Her armor had taken a beating and was showing significant signs of damage. No, Azrael ordered. Stand down, Miyoshi. Do not blow that pillar, he commanded as he ran towards the killer machine. Blow the fucking pillar, she countered. I'm already dead, were her last words. Then the concentrated fire of 30mm machine gun bullets ripped through her armor and her delicate flesh. Streaks of crimson painted the marble column. Blow the goddamn pillar, Azrael whispered, putting his hands over his ears. The noise was deafening as the column burst into flames, and the explosion engulfed the killer robot as it fell backwards into pieces. Azrael was lifted into the air from the blast, but landed safely on his feet, thanks to his battlesuit. Molten plastic oozed from the ceiling from the blast, engulfing the robot's and Shamika's torn remains. He walked to the pile of rubble only to find Shamika's severed right hand. He kneeled by it reverently and took the severed hand and placed it into the aluminum case. They will pay, he said menacingly. If I must kill every last Christian, they will pay, he said with a clenched fist. The terrorist shooters retreated upon seeing their final robot fall. Oh shit. I think the robot killed the commander's girl. The dirty, blonde, scruffy-faced terrorist shouted. That black bitch is already dead. She knew what she signed up for. The red-headed shooter with the fake blue and black American flag on his shirt said to his comrade as they fled the battle-torn auditorium. Although they had control over the broadcasting floor points of entry, security forces were standing by on all entry points on the floors above and below. There were even armed unmanned aerial vehicles patrolling the skies in the event the terrorist blew out a window and attempted to escape by aircraft. Azrael was confident the terrorist scum would be apprehended, trialed, and executed within the next 2 hours. The Constitution of the First World Order did not take terrorism lightly. After the world became one nation, there were no more wars. Still, nationalism, religion, and tradition were enough to motivate private citizens to take to arms and organize for violence against the newly established global government. Some opposed the idea of a one-world government. Others were against the vaccine mandates. Some were fighting to stop the progression of artificial intelligence and thought they were doing God's will. Regardless of the motive, if a person was caught in the act of terrorism, they would have an expedited trial by artificial intelligence assessing video evidence. In the event of a guilty sentence, there would be an execution by various means depending on the circumstances. Some methods were fast, others were slow. Some were merciful, while others were excruciating. No cruel or unusual punishments was not written into the Constitution of the First World Order. Shamika is dead, Yasmin said almost mournfully. Her tone changed. Still, this was a royal fuck-up in her department, she said, brushing the dust off her expensive pantsuit. To be fair, it's day one on the job for all of us, but to have a breach of this magnitude, something reeks of treachery. Yasmin spouted. Azrael held his hand up to silence her. She saw the cue to zip it and complied. He needed his headspace. Azrael just experienced the first of many assassination attempts on his life as first global citizen or president of the world. I'm going to need you to handle the press conference, Yasmin, Azrael said, walking towards the doors the robot smashed in. Someone has to report this and I can't right now, he said, looking downward. Yes, of course, she confirmed. Hell of a first day, Yasmin said encouragingly. I'll make sure we have a moment of silence for Shamika and some kind remarks. Azrael was silent. Go get that eye looked at, she yelled as he walked away. The security team finally arrived on scene. While they were fully geared, they also wore looks of shame. "That was a long 8 minutes," Azrael said dispassionately to the security lead. "The lieutenant commander was killed in action. This and your response time reflect poorly on your department," he said, walking past them. "Document these lessons learned and enhance the security measure ASAP. I'll be expecting the report by tomorrow morning, Euro 500, he said coldly. "Yes, Supreme Commander." The caption said at attention. The troops fanned into the auditorium for a needless sweep. They secured the weapons from the casualties and took pictures of the scene. Later, the bodies would be moved and a team would search for Shamika's remains. How was the network compromised? How did those Christian terrorists infiltrate the highest levels of our heaven? Azrael asked himself. Is there an insider threat? Is there treachery among the ranks already? He inquired himself. Flesh and blood can never be truly trusted, and robots can get hacked. Lesson learned. He acknowledged to himself, I must become the singular most powerful being in the world. Azrael thought, and then changed his mind. No, the world is not enough. The universe. Not only must I do this to rule the world and enforce my will, but to retain my own security. Azrael thought to himself. Throughout the course of his military career, Azrael made it a prerogative to establish rapport with the Research and Development Department. This granted him exclusive access to high-tech gadgets, armor, and weapons. Azrael was a warrior leader. He led from the front with boots on the ground. Although his advisors strongly encouraged him to stay out of harm's way, he constantly threw himself into conflict to turn the tides in warfare, lift the morale of his troops, and to evaluate new weapons and armor. Though he would never publicly admit it, he got off on the thrill of battle and heightened sense of danger. As a combat veteran of Iraq and the Second American Civil War, Supreme Commander Azrael Augustus wasn't your average policymaker. Hence, he made constant requests to review weapons and armor. If Yasmin did not receive the newest polycarbonate battlesuit prototype from DARPA, Azrael wouldn't have survived his first day in office. When you rule all the world's citizens, you get all of the world's enemies. A lot of people are upset, and I'm the scapegoat, he thought as the long conveyor belt-like sidewalk carried him to the elevators. The giant windows of our heaven's upper levels showed the curve of the earth below and the vast beauty of cold, dark space. Stars twinkled in the distance like diamonds on a black velvet cloth. The fortified temple palace he called home was 44.4 miles high and considered to be the first space scraper. Several satellites and space stations had to adjust their orbit during the construction of the massive megacity. Over 40 million people dwelled comfortably in the sci-fi pyramid known as our heaven. In the last half of the roaring 2020s, many conventional cities were destroyed and abandoned due to lack of funding and eventual anarchy. The true nature of people emerges in the absence of law and order. The moment the world knew that if you called 911 and no one was coming, hell befell the planet. The world was medieval with modern weapons. Although bullets became scarce for the average person, swords and melee weapons returned. After the weak were purged in the first wave of anarchy, the survivors were all scared, seasoned warriors. Only the strong survived outside of the mega cities. Still, the rich remained pampered in high-gated armed communities that they never left, say to travel to another community of equal or greater status. Wealthy private citizens with land and security offered shelter and safety to a limited few. Many of the elite were wealthy white men, and their private towns became a reflection of themselves. Life outside the walls was death for the weak. The good times before bred many soft men. Hence, men were a dying breed. If a wealthy landowner had capacity to take in someone in from the wild, they would usually take the women and turn away the men. If a woman can do the job, just as well as a man. Why should I harbor a toxic male to kill me and take all I worked so hard to acquire? Thought most powerful men at the time. Slavery returned, and humans became property and livestock once again. Slave masters raped their female slaves, and if the babies were male, they were either sold as slaves or sent into the wild to die. They worked hard to protect their harems. There was no law, hence it was not illegal. The world was flung into serfdom with majority male lords who ruled the lands with female indentured servants to work them. In a wicked sense of irony, male chauvinist pigs propelled the women's revolution, because women did slay their lords too and took all they worked so hard to acquire. Communities run by women began to emerge around the world. Slowly but surely, as old wealthy men died off, women were seizing power. Still, one wealthy melanated man by the name of Azrael Augustus built a structure to harbor the homeless after the Great War. He built it from recycled plastic and eventually erected the building over 40 miles high. It was rugged at first. The elite laughed as he struggled to build a city on the sea. Yet when it was polished, it was a marvelous spectacle on the surface of the world. He harnessed energy from the sun and the elements and thrived as the world struggled to survive. He extended his power and influence across the globe when they needed it the most. By 2039, more conventional order was returned to the world. Slavery was once more abolished as Azrael led security forces from town to town to do so. Shemika served under his command during the raids to liberate the people. Although Azrael had freed her from bondage, she saved his life several times. Serfdom was dissolved as the lands of the conquered slave owners were given to the woman. The newly freed woman formed communities and learned to domesticate the wild males roaming outside of the cities. In time, they all thrived and paid their taxes. Azrael built plastic megacities around the world. This produced a sense of civilization not seen on the earth since the roaring 2020s. This was before the Great Tribulation, when most governments fell in 2022. Anarchy prevailed and the world has been in disarray ever since. In John 1:2041, Azrael was elected first global citizen of the First World Order. The refugee camp he had constructed from plastic was nominated the First World Capital. His 44.4-mile-high penthouse in the stars was finally complete. Every time he looked out of the massive space windows upon the Earth, he couldn't help but to stop and marvel at how far he had come. He was literally standing 234,132 feet above the planet, staring into space.